Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I am a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what I do is talk with webmasters, publishers, people who have web search questions, like the people here in the Hangout, and like some of the questions that were submitted already. I went through the questions a little bit and tried to organize them slightly, so I'll be going through them in a bit of a different way. We'll see how this works. Maybe it makes it a little bit easier to follow along. Maybe not. So let's give it a shot. Basically, I have the questions organized into groups like duplicate content, general ranking questions, questions about penalties, site structure, structured data, site moves, geo-targeting, and then some more general questions towards the end. All right. Let's get started with some duplicate content questions. We've noticed a site that's driving traffic through syndicated content. The site is not the originator of the syndicated content. It's ranking very well for the domain. Do we need to be concerned about duplicate content penalties? So this isn't something where you need to specifically worry about duplicate content penalties. We don't have penalties around that, except for cases where sites are only aggregating content from other sites and there's really no unique content at all there. So that's something where I wouldn't really worry about penalties, but I try to be reasonable with the way that you're syndicating content, because essentially we might show one of these syndicated sources as well for the queries that you're looking at. So it's something that kind of dilutes your message. Well, let's try to find the next one. If you register a company in Yellow Pages and other online directories with identical company description, is that duplicate content? Is that like a problem? What should we do there? So yes, it is duplicate content. We would technically see that as something that's duplicated, but it's not something where I'd say this is really a problem. It's kind of like with the previous question, where we'll try to show the appropriate source in the search results, and that might be one of these listings, for example. So I try to be reasonable with the way that you reuse your content, but if this is just your company's description, then that's not something that I'd really worry about there. Let's see. What's the best practice for products with various sizes? We use canonical tag to one URL, but we don't rank for size search terms. Our competitors don't use canonical tags, and they rank. So who's doing it right? In general, I try to look at this more from a user point of view, with the mindset of, is this page something that will stand on its own? Is that something that the users would be searching for like that? Or is this essentially just an alternative of a different page already? So when it comes to sizes, maybe there are sometimes situations where users want to search for specific sizes. Maybe they need a special size that isn't something that's available anywhere else. But otherwise, I try to fold these URLs into one. Use a canonical to your main page. That way, you can also make sure that your main page really has all of the combined value of all the individual URLs that you have there. So that's essentially what I'd recommend there. Really take a step back, look at the pages, see if they stand on their own. If they stand on their own, then maybe it makes sense to keep them separate. If they're essentially variations of the same theme, then I'd probably fold them together with a canonical. Let's see.
By the way, John, regarding these size pages, we actually, what we did with some of our clients is that we made sure that the product description specifies available sizes. That way, we can still rank with that one page for those different queries.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, listing like the variations on the main page is definitely a good idea. Maybe it even makes sense to just have that main page and not have separate URLs for the individual sizes. That's kind of, I guess, the next step in concentrating everything into one strong page. We have two sites, the same product on a .com and a .com for UK and .com.au for Australia. Should I introduce Hreflang? so that Google knows that these are separate sites with the same content. Yes, that's a perfect situation to use hreflang for. So it's kind of duplicate content. You have the same content on both sites, but you have a preference which one of these URLs you want to have shown for which country or which language, and that's essentially something that you can let us know about, and we'll try to pick that up for hreflang. Okay, here's a question I can't find in the questions at the moment. We run quite a few B2B sites that we have to post product and press release information for our advertisers. Is it worthwhile for editors to edit these in any way, since it will end up on dozens of other sites, basically the same format? Does editing this kind of content have any effect on rankings or on a site's reputation? So this is something where I generally try to be reasonable, and on the one hand, if you need to do press release, then you need to do a press release, but I'd make sure you're not doing these for links, that you're not doing these for any kind of perceived SEO benefit. So if you need to give this information out through press release sites, for example, then fine, but just make sure that you're not doing this for any kind of link or SEO gains. All right, I keep hearing that Google is going to penalize every blog which doesn't use a responsive theme. So this is not true. We're not going to penalize every site that doesn't use a responsive theme. And it kind of goes on to say that I have a Blogger blog, and I doubt Google would penalize Blogger because that's like Google's own product, right? Well, from our point of view, from a search side, we kind of take the neutral approach to that and say, if you're doing something wrong and you're using one of our products, then that's just as wrong as if you're using someone else's products. We look at the website separately. So we don't say this is on Blogger, therefore it has to be good. There are probably lots of spam on Blogger. There's lots of really great content on Blogger. Just because it's hosted with one platform doesn't necessarily make it great. So I kind of separate the what Google would take action on from which Google products it might use. And the other part with regards to responsive themes, we do take mobile friendliness into account for the mobile search results, so specifically on smartphones. So that's something we do take into account, but it's not that we're going to penalize any of these sites. We're going to try to figure out which one of these are mobile friendly so that we can show them appropriately for mobile search users. Recently, Andre, a Google senior strategist, answered a question on Google Plus about nofollow links with regards to how like PageRank passes through them. So this is one of those questions we get all the time, and Andre likes to loosen things up from time to time, and he makes jokes. So I recommend making sure that you kind of understand the connotations around this, and specifically since this was in Russian, it probably makes sense to use more than just Google Translate to try to understand what is happening there. And from our point of view, this is really something where you need to take a step back, and there are probably other more important things to worry about than where PageRank flows. Like, is it 80% here, 20% here, or is it 70% and 25% here? That's really not something that will be affecting your site in the long run. So I'd recommend kind of ignoring those kind of things. If a link is marked as no and then a space follow, does Google still discount that? Or does it have to be coded as a nofollow in the code? So no and then the space follow is essentially a typo, and our systems try to be accurate, and they pick up the markup that you have on your pages, and if you have typos in your markup, then we can't recognize that. So we wouldn't treat that in any special way.
Okay, I have one question related to contents. I swap with Fernando. I'm not Fernando, actually.
All right, just go for it.
Yeah, I have a question related to contents. We are a search engine. We're a broker. We are comparing. Before we were comparing peer-to-peer car companies, and now we are just on the sector with normal car brokers, and we are making contents like guides related to cities and different offices. And actually, it's very good content with very good quality. but there are few difference between one guide and the other guide. Does Google penalize that, or is that good for SEO ranking, Google ranking? How does it work? Because the content is unique for each city, that is similar from city to city.
Yeah, so I would just make sure that you don't get into like the doorway page area with regards to this kind of content where essentially you're like tweaking the city name, but the main content stays the same. You're kind of tweaking the wording, but it's actually the same content. And doing that for a handful of pages probably makes sense. It can definitely make sense in some cases, but if you have a list of like 1,000 cities or more, and you're just like automatically tweaking this content to make it look unique, then that's something that we'd see more as doorway pages, and it doesn't really provide a lot of unique value to the users.
All right.
So that's kind of where I try to draw the line there.
All right.
Your new expiry date is the 20th of August 2016.
All right. Will I get an SEO benefit if the keywords I want to rank for are higher up on the page or above the fold, or doesn't it really matter anymore? From our point of view, if the content is on the page, and that's the important part, we try to understand the relevance of the content on the page. But just like shuffling things around in the HTML is not really going to make your page more relevant to users or to search engines. We're currently placing all important pages in the footer instead of having them on the home page. What's the best practice? By removing important pages from the footer and replacing them in the home page, will we lose or gain rankings? So I assume by putting, you mean more like by linking those pages. So you have important pages linked from the footer, and sometimes you have important pages linked from the sidebar or from the home page. From our point of view, we try to understand a site structure by looking at the way that these pages are linked amongst each other. So if you have a clean structure on your site and you're just like linking categories or main topics, or maybe pages like your terms of service or how to contact us or customer service information, linking that from your footer, then that's something that probably makes sense. Whereas if you're linking all of your content from the footer all of the time, and you're using like really long links, and your footer is this big pile of text with tiny HTML, then that's something that's probably not going to really help your site very much, because then we don't understand the structure anymore. And then we just see this big giant block of keyword stuffing on the footer, and we don't really know what to do with that. So again, kind of like with a lot of SEO advice, be reasonable and try to figure out what users would actually use. You can track some of this as well. You can use, I think, analytics to kind of track what things people are clicking on, and try to figure out which site structure works best for your users. In a hypothetical situation, and eShop shows products like leather shoes, a different leather shoe, another leather shoe on one page, does Google consider that as keyword stuffing, or is the algorithm able to differentiate product names from other texts? In general, we figure out what's happening on a page like that. We see that a lot with, for example, category pages on e-commerce sites, where you have one category page for leather shoes, and you list all of the different variations of leather shoes. I try to avoid being overly repetitive on a page like that. As a user, when you try to read a page like that, it does feel kind of awkward. If you have like blue leather shoe, red leather shoe, green leather shoe, and you kind of repeat this leather shoe theme all of the time, then that's really kind of awkward to read, awkward to use. So I try to shy away from that, but in general, we understand category pages, and we kind of know how they work. Here's an interesting one, slightly different. For the keyword netting, our site is being put underneath a Twitter result for an obscure actress who has the name netting in her name. All of the other results are awesome. How can we tell you that you shouldn't show this search result to anyone? So from my point of view, if this is your name and you have relevant content on your Twitter profile, then I think it makes sense to show that, even if other search results might be on a different topic. So that's not something where I'd say we should be filtering that out just because it doesn't match the theme that a lot of the other pages in the search results have. Sometimes search results pages have different themes, and that definitely makes sense. And it's also not going to be that any of your users who want to go to Google and they search for this keyword and they see your site ranking below a Twitter search result for an actress, they're not going to be confused and say, oh, I was actually looking for a product, but let me check out this random Twitter account that Google is showing me. They're going to know what they want to click on, and they're going to go there. So if those searching for that name want to click on the actress, fine. And those searching for a product and want to click on your site, that's fine too.
Yeah, I have another question related to content.
All right.
Like, we're working hard on translations, but so far our job is not so good on the translations. Like, we will have the web page in Spanish, and soon we'll have it in English and in German, but now the contents in English and in German are not that good. Does Google penalize those contents also for the Spanish version that is very good with good quality content?
No, we would treat those separately.
Separately. Okay, thank you very much. That was a good one.
A site is registered in Webmaster Tools and ranks for a lot of keywords around blue widgets. We create a second website that competes with the first one. Does the second site have like a diminished ability to rank? From our point of view, these are separate sites, so it's not something that I would see as a critical problem. On the other hand, if you're creating multiple sites to target the same thing, then you're kind of diluting your work. And maybe it makes more sense to have one really strong website rather than two websites that are kind of mediocre. So from my point of view, I try to aim on to have one really strong website instead of splitting things up like that. All right.
John?
Yes.
John, can I just... I wonder if is that person asking from an agency side, if they're looking after 2 or 3 sites with the same type of product, and there's a problem with one site. Does Google look at a connection between those sites because of the Webmaster Tools account? I don't think they're asking about just having 2 competing sites. Although that's how I kind of, because that kind of,
it could be both.
Our issue, that would be relevant to us. But I assume Google doesn't say, well, you're looking after this site and this site, and therefore we don't trust you, so
no,
we're going to diminish one.
No, I don't think that would really make sense, because there are some agencies that have hundreds of websites in their accounts, and just because they do doesn't really mean that there's any problem with that. That's a good one. Yeah.
And also related to what you said previously about mediocre content, like, we are building content that is very, very huge. Like, it's a guide, but it's very huge, and for a user experience, it's not that good. Do you think it's better to have it that big, or to have it split it into 2 different or 3 different web pages with different URLs, of course?
I try to figure out how you can create logical chunks there and make sure that each chunk can stand on its own. So if you split something up into too many parts, then maybe it doesn't really work on its own. If you keep one really gigantic piece of text and you recognize that people are actually searching for this section that's maybe 2/3 of the way down, then maybe it makes sense to split that up. So I kind of look at the situation. And
maybe with a toolbar or menu, what would you recommend? Toolbar or splitting?
Whatever works for you. We should be able to figure that out.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, another penalty question. We suspect we've been penalized in the past from a former webmaster. We've repaired that. We still fail to regain the old position 3 years later. Is it possible that there's like Google's holding a grudge against this website, essentially? From our point of view, if you've cleaned up a manual action and it's no longer visible in your Search Console account, then it's cleaned up. Then it doesn't have any effect anymore. There are 2 aspects that might be playing a role there as well. On the one hand, if, for example, you've cleaned up a problem with unnatural links and you've taken all of those unnatural links out, then it might have been that your site was ranking unnaturally 3 years ago. So that's something where maybe you fixed the problem, but that doesn't mean that you'll go back to that ranking that you had before. And the other thing to keep in mind is that 3 years is a really long time, and you can't reasonably expect any website, even if it was doing well, even if it never did anything wrong, to be ranking exactly the same after 3 years. So lots of things change on our side. Lots of our algorithms change. just because it was ranking really well 3 years ago and you fixed kind of the problem that you had in between doesn't mean that you'll go back to exactly that ranking before.
But John, that is what he's suggesting is possible, or are we unique?
Your situation. But I think in your situation, it's more of a situation that the algorithms have problems. So it's not that there's any kind of manual action that's in place there, because otherwise you would be seeing that, but rather that the algorithms are kind of unhappy with whatever there was there.
Right, but he's saying we suspect that they've been penalised rather than there's records or any evidence that they've been manually penalised.
Okay, well, I mean, if they don't know that they've been penalized, then that's, of course, even trickier. I mean, 3 years is a really long time, and lots of things can change over 3 years. So it's not something where
Not for us.
Well, I wouldn't expect things to kind of just jump back up in the same position again after 3 years just by cleaning some things up. So that's, yeah.
Excuse me, John, can I ask you something?
Sure.
Our new website is online from January. Until now, in the Webmaster tool, you have 404 errors with URLs from our old website. These URLs, we submit them for removal and we make redirects to the new URLs. Is there any way to remove all the URLs massively? Does all these 404 errors affect our ranking positions?
The 404 errors don't cause any problems for your rankings. That's perfectly fine. That's not something you have to manually remove from Search Console.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Another penalty question. Last year we recovered from a side-wide partial match penalty, and we've done a lot of good work since, but not seen any improvement. Has the previous penalty hampered any future prospects? Should we switch to a new domain? So like with the previous question, just because you've resolved the manual action doesn't necessarily mean that the site will jump back. It might be that things have changed. It might be that algorithms are picking up on other problems. It might be that there are some algorithms in play there that just take a long time to be updated again.
Can I ask you a question on that real quick?
Sure.
So basically, in a sense, what you're saying is once you have an action, whether it be manual or algorithm, once that issue is taken care of, the algorithm does not hold a grudge.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, there you go.
Here's a question about negative SEO. When we see inbound links from a scraper site, we just disavow them. Should we be more concerned when we see links from hacked sites? So disavowing links that you see from random scraper sites or hacked sites is definitely a good idea. In practice, we'll probably pick most of those up by ourselves and discount them already. But if you notice them and you're worried about them, by all means, go ahead and disavow them. That's essentially a good thing to do there. With regards to hacked sites, what I would watch out more there is just to double check that your site isn't hacked itself. One thing that we do see a lot is that people hack one website and they link to another website which they've also hacked where they try to promote their hacked content. So if you're seeing a lot of links from hacked sites, just really kind of double check and make sure that your site is safe, that there's nothing on it that's kind of not content that you don't want to provide, that it's, everything is kind of locked down properly.
John?
Yes?
All right, so just on that, so there's definitely no hacked part of our site whatsoever.
Okay.
But we're seeing now literally every day 2 or 3 new links from Google Alerts, either from hacked sites or very dubious looking scraper sites. So I've got a bit of a gun against my head from my boss, where obviously he doesn't want this to affect where we are in our organic search results. So it is simply disavowing the best route, because I'm having some sleepless nights about it now. That there's someone clearly much cleverer than you or I on this specific negative SEO kind of dark world that's going to come and bite us in the backside.
I think disavowing is perfectly fine. One thing we also see with a lot of scraped content is that they like to mix in links that look legitimate to try to make their content look legitimate. So that might be what's happening there, and that they link to all of this crazy pharmaceutical spam that they've created, and then they include a couple links to Wikipedia and some random normal websites that they find from the search results, and try to make it look like natural content. So that's probably what's happening there. And that's the kind of thing that our algorithms pick up on really well. And you generally don't really have to do anything about that. If you're worried about that, then the disavow is definitely a good thing to do.
Because what I've found is that if I don't have every day or every week the opportunity to disavow links. So we do it about once every month. So that would be interesting to get your take on that in terms of the time frame. But
Sure.
What I have noticed is once I have a clear out of these scrape sites, I mean, I only disavow stuff where the content is clearly just meaningless and no human being is going to want to look at the page. Generally, after I've done that, I always see a dip in our rankings for certain key search terms for maybe a couple of weeks after I've done that. So it's almost as if those crappy links are having a positive effect. I'm disavowing them, and we're coming down. Is that how things should be?
That sounds more like a coincidence than that it's really related. Because if you're disavowing links from spammy sites, from hacked content, then that's something we generally pick on fairly quickly and just kind of ignore on our side right away. So that shouldn't have any kind of effect on your site.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been recording this and I'm going to play it to my boss and try and keep my job.
Perfect. Good luck. I think you're doing the right thing. So it's not that you need to do anything different there, and you can't control the third-party websites. You can't really take them down. So disavowing them is essentially the right way forward there. Are there any future plans to communicate more about manual and automatic actions in Search Console? So at the moment, I think this is a topic that comes up from time to time. I think it would be nice to have more information about that in Search Console, but at the moment we don't have any plans to roll anything specific out there. All right. Let's see, some more that are kind of on the same direction. I understand Google is working on a Penguin update to be real time. When are you going to do it? So we are working on this. We are working on making this a little bit more faster, but at the moment we don't have any specific date to announce. And similarly, do you expect there to be a Penguin or a Panda update in the future? Should we stop asking? So again, at the moment we don't have anything specific to announce. And there was another question that was essentially the same. So can you tell us when the next Penguin update is going to happen? At the moment, we don't have any specific date that we want to announce there. And at Google in general, it's such that when people are working on something that's getting ready to launch, there are a lot of steps involved in making sure that the launch actually goes really well. So that's something where sometimes it just takes a while to get everything lined up properly, and sometimes that can result in delays. Sometimes that can even result in things rolling out a little bit faster.
Would you say it will be before the end of the year, maybe? If you can estimate just a wide estimation there.
I don't feel comfortable making that far of a future decision. So I would guess, but yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, sometimes we see things where we have all the internal information lined up and we're saying we're going to launch this in 2 or 3 days and everything is going to be awesome. And then something pops up and we say, well, okay, we have to fix this problem first. There's something with this data, and it gets delayed for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. And these things can always come up. And it's something that I think we need to make sure that we respond to, and that we don't just roll into something out that's not completely ready. So from that point of view, if it's more than a month out, then I really can't say anything.
Oh, but the new Penguin update will have this thing that is going to be refreshed automatically, so it's going to be more of a real-time.
That's the plan, yeah.
And if you manage to, I don't know, something happens, delay delays happen, are you going to do a manual refresh if you see it's taking too long to deploy this real-time update? So are you going to refresh it? Because the last update in last October, you are also saying that you're looking to make it real-time, and I'm guessing that didn't go well, so you launched it like you would normally do.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I can't really make any promises on that. I mean, if something really goes wrong and we can't do our plans at all, then maybe we have to find a different way to do that. Maybe we just have to be more patient. I don't know. There are lots of options.
Okay.
All right. So moving on. Hi.
I don't know if you got my message from
Probably.
the other day. Okay, well, anyway, it was about a site that had gotten a drop in rankings from a sub-site. For example, videos, examplesite.com, and then the examplesite.com that wasn't a sub-site did fine and didn't have any problem, but from the Panda algorithm, or it may have been coincidence, but in the same week that the algorithm was announced, that sub-site had a significant drop that persisted. Was a very clear pattern there. Is there any reason to think that it's not a Panda quality algorithm type of thing because because the main site did not suffer any issues, or would it be looking at those very quite individually?
We do try to be granular sometimes, so we try to make things that focus on specific parts. So theoretically, it's possible, but I think as like someone working on the site, you probably have a better grip on does the site have quality problems or not. So that's something I try to look at separately rather than to see this as something that could affect any random website, because some websites are really awesome and it's not kind of normal that they would see any problems with related to quality. And if you're doing site moves, then that can cause fluctuations as well. All of these things can come together, but I probably need to look at the specific example there.
All right, yeah, I sent you a note the other day. But so it's an e-commerce site, so sometimes a lot of these kind of fault might be in the in-between range where many of them are just not awesome, or because they are, they're selling products.
I'll take a look, and if there's something specific that I can point out, then I'll let you know.
All right. Thanks.
All right. So moving on to some more site structure type questions. I posted a question in the forum. However, I'm not happy with the responses. So I took a quick look at that, and roughly the question was, do I always need to specify an alt text for images? And the answer that was in the forum was mostly like, think about your users and do the right thing there. So from our point of view, you don't need to always specify an alt text for images. We look at a lot of factors with regards to image search, such as things that look like captions, titles, headings, the text on a page. If there are reasons for you to specify an alt text and you think that it does help to understand what is happening there, for example, for people with screen readers, then go ahead and do that, but don't just do that for any perceived random SEO benefit.
Hey, John, it's specifically relative to folks that are the SEO guy on our team is basically saying it's redundant content. So we have the alt text on the image and then the text right below it, but he's saying to do that, whereas I'm saying that's a bad idea because the screen reader reads that content twice.
Sure, yeah. I'd look at the individual situation there. It's not something that you would be required to do for SEO, for example. If we can pick up the content elsewhere, then that's perfectly fine.
Okay, so having it there twice doesn't have the added value for SEO.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Okay, I have something related to that content, but it's not related to pictures, or images, but tables, because we have lots of tables with lots of data, and then we comment the tables. Is that good for SEO, or is it redundant as well?
That can make sense. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So even if it's similar from one page to another, as I told you previously for the cities, it will be okay because it's a comment of the tables, right? It's a good thing to do.
Sure. I think if you can give some context for the information on a page, that definitely helps us. With regards to tables, sometimes we can pick that up and also show it as in a part of the snippet. So that sometimes is a good idea to do. And sometimes tables are the right way to express information for users, that they can just glance at it and see right away what's happening there. So
yeah, but as long as it helps the user, it will be good for Google, right?
I would primarily focus on that, but again, kind of going back to the original answer, I just make sure that you're not creating doorway pages where you're automatically generating these pages in big masses.
All right. Thank
you. John, you said you're picking up tables and maybe using them for rich snippets. Does it have to be the exact table of HTML tags, or do you pick up divs as well?
It's easier for us to pick up the table HTML if you're using like a tabular display. That way, it's a lot easier to see, well, this is like the heading row, and with divs and CSS, maybe there are things like happening that things are being shuffled around, and it's not exactly clear which element is in which row related to which column. So that's sometimes a bit trickier.
Okay.
We use tracking parameters on our product pages and search results. We also use a canonical tag there to kind of combine that. Are we passing link juice? If not, what's the best practice? Using the canonical tag there is perfect use of that. I also try to make sure that within your website you're linking to the clean URLs as well, so that people can go to the URLs with the tracking parameters, maybe if they come in through an ad or some other source. But when they're navigating within your website, that they can kind of stay on the clean URLs, because the more information you can give us to say, this is the URL that I actually want to have indexed, information like which URL is in the sitemap, which URL is linked within the website, the canonical tag that you're using, the more likely we'll be able to pick that up and actually use that. Whereas if we get conflicting information, like everything within the site is linked like this, but the canonical tag says this, then our algorithms basically have to make a decision for you, and maybe it'll go this way, maybe it'll go that way, maybe it'll also change over time. So the more consistent you can be with URLs, the easier it is to keep us focusing on that.
John, can I ask just a quick question on the canonical side of things? So
sure.
It seems that it's used mostly by sort of e-commerce with different sizes and variations of products, and that's how we use it on our site. We're resellers, so we give our customers the opportunity to write their own description if they want to on the blue widget that they're reselling through ourselves. Where they write a description that is over, I think we put it at something like about 150 words, we then trigger the PHP to say, well, look, this is no longer a canonical version of the main blue widget site which they're referring to. Is that sort of a legitimate use to take off the canonical tag at that point, or?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, if you can,
a lot of these descriptions are sort of fairly similar, but they are all written by, our users and customers.
Yeah. I mean, kind of taking the stance of does this page stand on its own, that kind of gives you some guidance with regards to canonical. So if the descriptions on that page are really unique and really something that make this page different from the rest, then by all means use them separately and kind of don't fold them together with the canonical. But if you're seeing that these pages are essentially the same and it's just like one is blue shoes and the other one is shoes and blue, then that's something where maybe it makes sense to fold them together.
Can I send you an example?
Sure.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
All right. There's one about a mobile site. Let's see. Our mobile site isn't hardly getting any traffic. We notice Google only indexed the homepage. Can you offer any insight into what might be causing this? So I saw a similar case in the forum recently where a site was using normal URL structure for the desktop site, and on the mobile site they were using kind of like the JavaScript-based URL structure that just had like the hash symbol and then some text afterwards. And from our point of view, if you're using this kind of fragment URL, then that's not something that we fully support. So it might happen that we index some of these. It might happen that we drop them again. And if you're using that to kind of connect your desktop site to your mobile site, then that's something that might be a bit flaky and might be something, or is probably something I'd recommend against. So as much as possible, make sure that your mobile URLs are really clear URLs that can be crawled directly. And then we'll be able to kind of connect that with your desktop site, assuming you also have like that link between those mobile pages and the desktop pages properly, like the rel alternate to the mobile page, and from the mobile, the canonical back to the desktop page. But if you're seeing something like this where only the mobile home page is being connected properly and the rest isn't, then that sounds very much like a technical problem to me. If you belong to professional bodies and trade associations, is there any SEO benefit to having external links going to those sites? From our point of view, this is really up to you. It's not something that we would say there's any SEO advantage of linking to anyone else's site. But if you think that this is a link that helps users understand your site better, then maybe that makes sense. So that's like regardless of what you're linking to, if that's like the manufacturer of something that you have, a trade organization you're active in, a general other government site, or some other website that you think makes sense for the users, if that's something that works for users, by all means go ahead and do that. How many internal links is too many? Wait, let's see which one this is. Some of our pages, including the home page, have over 7,000 internal links pointing to it. The links are a mixture of website links and links from the blog. So this is perfectly normal. If you have a well-structured website, then obviously your category pages, your main pages, will be getting a lot of internal links, and that's perfectly normal. That's not something that I try to artificially constrict or kind of twist in any artificial way. That I think that's perfectly normal there. Let's see. We have a little bit of structured data questions. Not that many. We're looking to get our event data featured in the knowledge graph. We've been manually testing with schema.org, but it hasn't triggered yet. We get rich snippets for the individual pages. How long do we have to wait? In general, this is something that takes a little bit longer for us to actually pick up on and to understand and be able to trust your website in that regard. You're welcome to send me a link so I can take a quick look. But if you're already getting rich snippets for those pages and your markup is validating, then chances are you have things set up properly, and it's more a matter of time for algorithms to actually understand that properly. Should we follow the schema tags to get the knowledge graph? Because when I browse other sites, I don't see any schema.org implementation over there while we're getting a proper knowledge graph for their brand. So schema.org markup within a page isn't a requirement for a knowledge graph page that's shown on the side. The knowledge graph entry is really something separate. We do try to pull in more additional information from web pages using schema.org for the knowledge graph, but it's really something separate from that. So it's not just a matter of technically implementing something, and then we'll show you our algorithms really have to kind of take a better look at the site and understand it a little bit better.
Sorry, Jon, for this URL things that you were saying before, we have some search parameters and we don't know whether it's good or not to put these search parameters into the URL by get, or leave the URL as clean as possible by post. What do you think is the best thing?
Search results.
Yeah, for search results, I don't think it really matters that much. In general, we should be able to crawl your website normally without going through search. If we can't crawl your website properly without going through search, then having search parameters makes sense, because then we can crawl the search page and find your content through that. But otherwise, I don't think it really matters there. Using post makes it a little bit easier because we're unlikely to kind of crawl random URLs from your site and cause a lot of server load for that, but it's really more up to you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we have a bunch of site move questions or site change questions. We have some really great site move documentation, so for a lot of these things, you'll probably find an answer there too. Is there a way to convert an old, well-established non-keyword URL to a keyword URL, for example, /123.html to /coolgadget.html? Yes, you can do that. You just set up a redirect, a 301 redirect from the old URL to the new URL. I just like to throw a note of caution out there that just by putting keywords into your URLs, you're not going to rank randomly better. So we use URLs as a way to identify these pages, but it's not the case that we would say, well, there's a keyword in this URL, therefore it must rank #1 for this URL. So this is not a requirement for ranking. If you have a website that uses non-keyword URLs and it works well like that, and maybe it's worth keeping it like that, or maybe it's worth waiting until you do a bigger revamp anyway, and then switching to a cleaner URL structure. But I wouldn't artificially go to a website and say these are non-keyword URLs, therefore it must change to being keyword URLs. Because when you make any kind of a site change like that, it does take quite a bit of time for everything to be processed. And during that time, you are likely to see quite a bit of a dip. So I wouldn't randomly recommend doing site URL changes like that just because of and hope for SEO advantage.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
That law firm that I was telling you about that we took over the contract in January, excuse me, they used to use the www. When we took it over, we completely redid the site because it was a crap site, and we got rid of the www. They had a pretty strong link profile to www, but all that juice basically follows to the non-www that we have now, right? Because now it's okay, all right, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have redirect set up, that's the way it works.
Yeah. If they type in www, it goes to just home. So all that juice from all those links go in there as well.
Exactly.
Oh, all right, thanks.
We have two different websites for car rental. We'd like to merge them into one. What's the best way to do that? What will happen to the domain authority for the final website? So in general, mixing two websites is always a bit of a tricky situation because you usually can't just do like a one-to-one mapping. So we essentially have to crawl those two websites, understand what the new combined structure is, and kind of treat the site like that. That's similar for the domain authority. I think domain authority is something from some external SEO tool. Essentially, we try to understand how this new combined domain should be showing up in search. And usually it's not a matter of saying, well, this website got 1,000 visitors, the other one got 2,000, therefore the combined one will get 3,000. But it's something where we try to have to figure out what is this combined website like in search. And it might be that the combined website is even more visible in search because we think, oh, this is a really, really strong page on this topic now. It might also be that we say, well, you're combining two mediocre websites and you're making another mediocre website. It doesn't really make sense to add those things up. So there's no absolute answer with regards to mixing sites.
John, can I use that opportunity to get our usual question in, which I sent you on Google+, which is that the new domain which we've moved to uses totally different HTML code and everything now. It's the same content. But we're trying to move. We need to move all the old links from the old domain, and we can. Like, there are a lot of strong links there, as you know, from the last 10 years. The problem is we can really only do that once. You can only write to CNN, BBC, whoever these people are, and ask them to move the links once. So I really need an answer to whether the new domain has also been affected, because if we move them and it's going to do nothing, we basically, then we're definitely screwed, because we can't do it again.
Yeah.
But is the new domain okay?
I think we looked at the new domain in one of the previous Hangouts, and it was fine, right?
Well, yes, but it's been 6 to 7 months now, and it's not. There's been no increase at all in visitors. Nothing is changing at all there, and it feels like it's having exactly the same issues as the last one.
I probably need to look at that separately. Yeah.
Would you mind then? Because I've sent it to you on Google Plus, but
yeah.
It may come from. I just had to change my Google account as well, because we moved to Gmail, so as our mail server, and it made me create a new account. So even on Google Plus, I may have to. It may come from a different Rob Young.
Okay.
Although you probably blocked the previous one, so this one might get through.
I only block spammers. Sorry.
Okay,
I'll double check on that.
It's just going up to Christmas, obviously, and with only this one opportunity to do it with the links. I'd really appreciate if you could let me know.
Sure.
Thanks.
Excuse me, John, may I proceed with another question?
Okay.
For some keywords, we see that we have big ranking position changes every week. For example, we see today our website ranking for a keyword at the 2nd page, and the next week may be ranking at the 15th page, and after 2 weeks not ranking at all for the exact same keyword. Why does this happen?
That's hard to say. Sometimes that can make sense. Sometimes that's just from like the SEO tool that you might be using, but it's really hard to say. Sometimes we just feel that it's relevant and we show that. Sometimes we aren't able to do it. But if you can send me the link, I can definitely.
Okay. Do you suggest to move our website to a new domain to avoid the possibility of bad ranking caused by our old website, which had several blog problems?
I didn't quite understand the question. Can you repeat that?
Do you suggest to move our website to a new domain because we had our old website, which had several problems, and maybe have some
I don't think that's that easy of a decision. I mean, moving to a new domain is something that's a lot of work, so I wouldn't do that just randomly based on like some quick answer from me, for example. So I'd really look into what's happening with your website and try to find out how best to kind of resolve that.
Okay, so I will send you the URL, and if you can check it, please.
I'll try to see what I can do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, we have another site move question. Where was it? We moved our site to a new CMS that's hosted on a slightly different host name. We set up 301s. Is there anything else that we need to do? No, that's essentially the right thing to do there. If you have 301s set up from the old URLs to the new ones, then that helps us to understand the structure better. Make sure that the canonicals are also doing the same thing there. Then that should essentially be fine. All right, we ran out of time. What a surprise. OK, let me just run through the questions that I have left on my cheat sheet and see if I can answer some really quickly. Can having a spammy title hurt your ranking? In general, no. What will probably happen is we'll just change it when we show it in the search results. How important is it to review and edit grammar and spelling on user-submitted content? From our point of view, that's not critical, but at the same time, you're responsible for your website, and you kind of stand for everything that you publish there. And if you put really low-quality user-generated content front and center, then your website starts to look kind of bad. So that's something where reviewing and editing the grammar and spelling of user-generated content is probably not the highest priority, but figuring out which of this content is really the content you want to stand behind, that definitely does make sense. Let's see. What else do we have here? If we follow Google's guidelines and block access to Googlebot like we do for US users for a gambling site, is there still a way to use webmaster tools like Fetches Google and be confident that it's crawling from other countries? So we do crawl from some other countries at some times, but it's not something that we do that regularly. So if you're really blocking all US traffic, then chances are, for the most part, you'll be blocking Googlebot as well, and we won't be able to index your content at all. So what might make sense there is to use something like a no index on these pages instead, so that we can still crawl them. Then you can still use Search Console, the tools that we provide there. It might make sense to have some content that can be seen in the US. Maybe there's a way to create something that's kind of informational about your website that is available to be shown to users in the US, because then we could crawl and index that content and show that in the search results and not show your main content. But at the moment, there is no way to specify which countries content should be shown in for the search results. So you can give us information with Hreflang, which content you prefer to have shown, but you can't say this content must not be shown to users in this country, and this content should be shown to users in that country. You can only say, well, you can have this or you can have this, and pick the version that you want to show best. All right. Wow. So in general, what do you guys think about organizing the questions a little bit more by topic? Is that helpful?
Yeah, quite helpful.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
Yes. OK. So if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll try to pick that up as well and take that into account. I thought I'd be able to go through these a bit faster if they were organized by topic, but it seems that there are just a lot of questions, and there's a lot of stuff to say. So maybe we need to find a different way to handle kind of the overflow questions and bring them to the forum or somewhere else to give a quick answer there as well. All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you all for all of the questions, all of the discussions along the way. I thought it was really useful this time, and maybe we'll catch you in one of the future Hangouts as well. So wish you guys a good week, and see you next time, maybe.
Thanks, have a nice weekend.
Adios.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.